For the Joy Sports Link, it's the longest running sports program on this 25-year-old network. My name is Nathaniel Attoh, and as usual, we're bringing you the big conversations, and they are right here. This is your number one spot or platform for the biggest conversations. We're having a football conversation later on. With everything that has happened on the football front here in Ghana and globally, it is important that we have this conversation. And of course, joining me later on for this very big one is a face that over the years has surely been synonymous with football administration on different fronts. And considering the fact that he has seen it from different angles, makes him very well aligned for this conversation. Dr. Kwame Baah Nuakoh will be my guest here on the Joy Sports Link on Joy 99.7 FM. We'll get into that very shortly. But right now, Spain will be a very interesting place to be, especially those in the Catalonian area. You know what I'm talking about, right? Well, last night we all witnessed a disaster on television. Obviously on radio and on this dial, it was a fantastic time as we brought you the best of live commentary which can make you leave the screens and actually follow us. Big ups to the rest of the team, especially to George Addo Jr. and Gary Al Smith for bringing us every single moment of that big disaster from a Spanish perspective. Enough of that. Now, from the Spanish perspective, we want to talk about the Spanish Grand Prix, which obviously is in the big headlines this weekend. Last weekend was a very big surprise in the sense that Max Verstappen killed all of the expectations and the predictions and got a good one to pick up the 70th anniversary title at Silverstone. As usual, with me here in studio, Kwabrapoku, the national coordinator for Formula One Ghana, and of course, immediate past president of BMW Ghana, Dr. Asante Appiah. He has a BMW called Uboshi. There's one here that's a smaller version. I don't know what name he's given. Doc, should we call this one Nisai? Oh, great to have you. You know, like I said, Spain is a place, you know, greetings to all our Barcelona fans, but, you know, I'm not intending to rub this in, but hey.
This condition is permanent.
Did you watch the game, though? You watched the game?
I did.
You did? I see. So you kept laughing like this, Doc?
I was very, very happy.
I see.
Very happy.
Well, my dear Barcelona fans, I'm only moderating the discussions here. Please forgive me if it sounds like we're, you know, rubbing it in this afternoon. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so we all got it wrong, and we have to eat humble pie because, you know, considering what happened 3 weeks ago, we were very confident that Hamilton was going to do it again at Silverstone, considering that it was the same track and he had done something marvelous just the week before. But Verstappen was the man.
That guy is, from time to time, he comes up with some strategy that beats everybody. You know,
okay.
They changed the whole tire strategy. They started with very hard tires, and they were able to keep pace with the Mercedes on their medium tires.
Wow.
So his team was telling him to slow down, and he says, no, this is the first time that I think I can get them, so I'm not slowing down.
And he didn't slow down, and he got them.
And he got them.
Wow.
He did a very short stint on the medium tires, so he had hard, medium, and hard.
Interesting.
That's how he won the race. that guy has a bit of arrogance about him, which I like. And I think for a very competitive sports person, I think sometimes you need that.
Yeah, sure. And from the Hamilton perspective, obviously he wanted to pick this one, considering the fact that it was to mark a milestone.
Yeah, it was a milestone. It was a home race for Mercedes as well, the team as well, and for him and his home country race and all that. So it was really something good for them. You see, Verstappen took the risk of going on hard tires. Mercedes were depending on probably safety car showing up one way or the other to aid their tire strategy. But we had quite one of the few clean race with not even a safety car showing up. It was just one in some sectors, and that was it. But we had a very, very clean race, and I mean Red Bull did what they could do best. I mean Mercedes could have won this race if they had done their tire strategy in terms of pit stops and all. If they had done it very well calculated. But I mean, still for me, Verstappen won the race clean and fair and square. I mean, it was his day, and he took advantage of it. He took the risk, and he took the race. Yeah.
But of course, we had all predicted here that it was going to be Lewis Hamilton,
exactly,
right?
Well, if he had one or two more laps, he would have won the race easily anyway.
Well,
no.
Good afternoon to all of you who are joining us via My Joy Online TV, especially those of you who are outside of Ghana. Greetings to all of you, and thank you very much for being here with us on the Joy Sports Link, where we're now throwing focus, as usual, on Formula One, reviewing what happened last weekend at Silverstone, and throwing the light now on what we should be expecting in the Spanish Grand Prix. Of course, in practice, Ocon had a bad accident.
Yes, he had a bad accident, so there were red flags. So the session couldn't be completed properly, but it's still fine. We're going to do the qualifiers very soon.
And based on this, and based on the happenings from last weekend, what's the rating? What are we looking at?
Well, again, Mercedes has taken FP1, FP2, FP3 in terms of fastest time. For me, I'm expecting them another 1-2, but what probably they should be avoiding is Verstappen showing up in the second row again, which I know he would, obviously. He's right behind them. The tire temperatures on the track and everything is kind of aiding them in a way, but Mercedes still has something to give. I saw all the practice sessions, and look, they just tried to prove a point that look, we have a very strong car, and we have the pace. The Spanish track is a very tricky track. That's why they have all the testing over there before the season and all that. So it's one of the tracks that is very good for the cars and all that, and you can tell the way every driver is doing well on those tracks. So I'm expecting Mercedes to show up this weekend.
But there's a big variable.
Okay, tell me.
They're not used to the temperatures.
Very well.
This is the hottest they will ever race in Barcelona, because normally it's not this time of the year,
Very well,
so
yeah.
that is a big variable for all the teams.
I see.
So it's going to be very interesting.
Okay, temperature issues, and of course, based on what we've seen, the past week, we should be expecting a very interesting race as well in Barcelona this weekend for the Spanish Grand Prix. What's the plan for this weekend regarding the viewing?
So we're going back to Labadi Beach Hotel and the DSTV showroom for the main viewing parties. As usual, Labadi is giving amazing discounts for F1 fans coming through, and we have also amazing packages for those going to DSTV as well, with DSTV giving amazing Explorer packages just for F1 fans who show up tomorrow at the various viewing parties and want to take advantage of getting a DSTV decoder. And we also have a lot of gifts coming our way from Heineken. We're also, by this, also thanking our partners for last week. They gave us a good show, and we have the likes of Starbites, Labadi Beach Hotel, Heineken, Joy FM, amazing reportage, which we've actually sent the report to FIA. The report that we received from Joy FM, we've actually mailed it to FIA and the F1 team for them to see what was going on in Ghana during the celebrations. We have 2 more celebrations coming up.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. I mean, I saw we put up the drone shots on on TV. The drone shots of everybody sitting in their cars and watching, and some on the edges and everything. It was amazing. It was amazing. And of course, and of course, we can't go without talking about BMW and that initiative, BMW Ghana, and that initiative which you took during the week. I mean, ahead of the viewing party, there was the distribution of of face masks and other equipment to deprived communities. Doc, how did that go?
We do our usual driving around and things, but we also have a big social conscience.
Yes.
That this is a time that we also have to reflect on the less privileged in society. So we gathered a few masks and went to certain areas and we distributed them.
So it wasn't just masks, it was wipes, masks, face shields. So because we had this one at Leicester Square, we distributed the masks in Corley High Street area. The second driving event is in September at the Labadi Beach Hotel Drive car park, and we're going to concentrate on the Labadi Mami area, the Teshi Mami area. And the third one, which is going to be at the DSTV show, will be concentrating on Medina and its environs.
Very well.
Distribution, and then we end up. So
very well.
BMW Club, amazing guys. I mean, they always show up. And then we're also working with the Mask for All team as well. You know, who is also helping us come in. I mean, most of our partners, even as we speak now, right after the event, we started receiving calls from people who were ready to give us masks, face shields, wipes, you name it. You know, so. I mean, people have actually seen what we are doing and they want to come in and help with the whole activity.
Wow, interesting stuff there. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much, and let's see how it goes. So, based on our disaster of a prediction from last weekend, let's see.
Right. The only person who had it right, Clement Dodu.
Clement.
Okay. Actually predicted Verstappen winning the race.
I see.
Yeah, but with what happened in to Barcelona yesterday, we are in Barcelona this weekend.
So anything can happen.
Any number can win.
You mean Hamilton can even finish fourth? Or probably they even miss the podium very, very rarely. Anyway, so let's see how all of it goes. Doc, thank you so much, and Kwame Poku, thank you so much as well.
Thank you.
Let's see how it goes tomorrow, and of course, we'll have the usual reportage on all of our platforms, on TV, on radio, and online. All right, so thank you so much, and there's a message from Mauli Zogbenu, my good friend, insurance consultant Mauli Zogbenu. He says that we should call, we should christen Doc's other BMW, the smaller one, Ni Alangbai. Thank you so much. So it's almost midday here on Joy 99.7 FM. And of course, good afternoon to you, Mr. Prosper Ashikwe, also known as Dynasty. Thank you very much for tuning in. And of course, we're expecting all of the text messages. Remember, it's +233-244-340437. You can also tweet at us. It's at JoySportsGH. So today we're having a general football conversation. And we decided to place someone who's seen both sides of it. From the area of running it, from the level of the clubs, operating at the FA, and also operating at the partnership level. And I'm talking about key partners within corporate Ghana who believe in our football product and come on board in a strategic way to move it forward. Well, Dr. Kwame Baah Nuakoh has written a very, very long CV up to this point. And we don't need to go into that because that probably will take another 15 minutes. But of course, his name is synonymous with football and encapsulating everything. He's a fine economist, chartered banker, and administrator. Full stop. Dr. Kwame Baah Nuakoh, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a long time.
Nat, thank you very much. It's been a long time in the multimedia studio.
Yeah, sure.
I paid my dues to multimedia.
Of course,
so
of
when
course.
you talk about what I've done in the football things, always start with the fact that I started as a fan.
As a fan, very important.
Went into sports media.
For sure.
Sports administration.
Very well.
Sports research and
then you
back as a fan. I'm a regulator now. So I'm
of course. The reason why you are in the big seats today, and we're glad to have you here. So many things. There are so many things that we want to talk about today, but let's begin with how we recovered as a nation following, COVID-19 and its impact. From where you sit. And very importantly, Dr. Kwame Baah Nuakoh is also the chairman for the Club Licensing Committee. Okay. Now, from where you sit, how would you assess our recovery as a nation after COVID-19, affected the whole world?
In respect to football, I guess.
Exactly.
We're still in the process. I don't think we've fully recovered yet. We're in the process. Football hasn't started anyway. The farthest we've gone is to even allow some of our junior national teams to go to camp.
Very well.
And ask them to observe very strict protocols so that we check what happens and determine what the next steps should be as far as football is concerned. We're taking the lessons from the more developed football countries. I think Germany showed the example by telling us that we could, by taking the right steps, we could still bring back football without endangering the lives of the people involved in the game. It's not just the spectators, but the players, the officials, the match officials, the organizers. If you look at the organization of a game in, let's say, the UK, the number of people involved in a match day program is so many. And so if you notice, the Premiership says each club is entitled to about 30 people maximum, but because they know that is the minimum that is required to ensure that a football club works well on a match day. And of course, a few administrators around to make sure that the right decisions are taken. Ghana has to learn from that, but we probably need to take one step at a time. I know the FA has put together a program which they've shared with the clubs, asking for their inputs on what the structure for the game should be, assuming the state authorities and the health officials allow football to come back, at least for this season. What form should it take? And I think there's currently a conversation. So at the club licensing board level, you cannot, for instance, use the same metrics that we applied last year in measuring who qualifies for a license, because it will depend even on the format in which the game is played. So if you look at some of the proposals coming up, we might not have a full football season. The number of matches will be limited. The venues to be used might also be limited, and it might not be a decision of a particular club to use a particular venue. It might be the choice of the FA to say that, look, these are the limited number of venues we are going to use for the season. In that case, do you then ask a club to apply for a license to use a particular venue? Because that venue was not the choice of the club. It becomes the choice of the FA. And so who applies for a license to use the stadium? It is now the FA. So as a club licensing board then, so the whole metrics has changed because of COVID.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned something very key here, which brings me to, or reminds me about the economic status of all of these clubs that we have. So, for instance, if your outfit, the club licensing board, decides that we're using 4 stadia across the country, then it means that it's going to affect those who are not in close proximity and would probably have preferred to use a place of their choice, and all of these will have financial implications.
Okay.
Right?
So in this particular situation, the decision as to the number of stadia to be used will not be the decision of the club licensing board. It's based on the structure of the league and the FA's decisions. And that's why I'm saying that it is not for a club to even probably choose their venue.
Sure.
That is if the clubs go along the plans that have been proposed by the FA, that it might not be the choice of the clubs to determine which of the venues are to be used. And the proximity will not be the decision of the club licensing board. But you're right, it has financial and economic implications. Even in terms of travel costs,
sure,
accommodation, and hotel accommodation, where some clubs might travel from short distances, and which ones will be coming from a longer distance. And in terms of accommodation, can you stay in a town next by, which probably has cheaper hotels, or you are constricted to a particular set of hotels, because safety protocols also have to be, conformed to. So all these throw up different, perspectives,
scenarios,
considerations as far as the economics and the finance of it. But basically, what we are doing is trying to compare it to this way, the way we intend to go, and no football. So it's no longer a choice of you're making a choice between the current plan and what we are used to, because COVID has not allowed us to do what we are used to. We all need to realize that we are not in normal times. So what are the choices available to us? And that is the decision that the FA has thrown back to the clubs. Once the two parties agree, the club licensing board only implements what the FA, let's say the executive committee and the Congress, the regulations, have agreed on. In terms of club licensing for the year, we need to admit that we cannot implement the regulations as it is currently written. If you look at the English FA, what they did is that they have the English Premier League rule book. And when they realized COVID had taken a toll on several factors and we're now going to open under new regulations, they amended the regulation. So for 2019-2020 league season, they had two different sets of rule books. The one that they were using before COVID came in, and the rule book that they had post-COVID. And they had amended the the rules to incorporate the protocols that clubs, and it's effective on the distribution of revenue, because that rule book determines how revenues are shared, how television and broadcast revenues are shared, how gate revenues are shared, who can play in the match, substitution, and all those things. And so they went back to the general meeting and agreed that let's amend the rule book to once the FA decides the format they are going, we assume the club licensing board would have assumed that they have amended the rule book that will be used for the Ghana Premier League, and because of that, the club licensing board has to follow suit. We cannot sit in our comfort and assume that, well, this is what the rule says, because they've not gone to Congress to change the FA and the league regulations, so we are still applying the previous one. We need to be flexible enough to appreciate the circumstances that we are in.
So, very, very high likelihood that okay, lost the thread. You're still here on Joy 99.7 FM. This is the Joy Sports Link, and here with me in studio is Dr. Kwame Baah Nuakoh. He is the head of the Club Licensing Board. You can send in your messages. Remember, it's 0244 340 437. 0244 340 437. There's a high likelihood that we can have an amendment, our rules amended for this coming season. And then the second thing as well is that we have time. We've given ourselves time to restart the season in October. So, what are the timelines that your outfit and all the others, the other sub bodies? What are the timelines that have been given?
What has happened is that the FA has sent their draft proposal for the league season, what they consider will be the season, including the timelines. Then the clubs will have to come back with their comments, and I know they were given a very limited timeline. I think the deadline is almost up, or it's even past. So the clubs have made their submissions. The executive committee, the executive council of the FA will then sit down and based on the comments that came. For instance, if they get massive support for whatever proposal they have made to the clubs, it means they probably will go according to the timelines they have which was looking at somewhere second week in October. But considering what has happened, I still believe, based on some conversations I had with officials of the FA, that second week in October itself might not be very realistic. They might push it to the end of October. If that's the time frame, then the club licensing board will have to immediately begin its consultations with the clubs. The position that we have taken as a board has always been that you need to engage with the clubs. No matter what position, i.e. the metrics you are going to use to assess them, it's important that you share it with them before they even start the process of submitting their application. I think in the past, what had happened was that clubs have been asked to apply for licenses. When the licensing process is over, then there's a stakeholders engagement to discuss the licensing. The current board took the position that it's better to engage the clubs, let them appreciate what you are looking for from them before they even start processing, so that it cuts down the amount of errors even in application. If they understand what they are expected to do, it's easier for them. And so in terms of timelines, within the next few weeks, that based on what the clubs are set to do with the FA, because it is purely based on the FA's program. If let's say the clubs say, no, we don't want the shortened league, we want to play a full league, then it means the FA has to go back to the drawing board, decide what the start time of the league and the end period should be. That should also affect club licensing processes. But there are aspects of club licensing that we can begin to do without waiting actually for the timelines. For instance, asking clubs to submit documents relating to their registration status with the Registrar General, which is a requirement of the FA's own regulations, that for a club to play in the Premier League, it has to be a company registered under the Companies Act as a limited liability company. That is a requirement that the FA has placed on all clubs who have agreed to play in the league. So as Club Licensing Board, one of the first things we look at is whether you have complied with that, because it's a basic requirement to be a member of the FA as a Premier League club. So if, for instance, you are a limited liability company registered under the Companies Act, the Companies Act also imposes some requirements on you. So this brings us to another part of the conversation.
Sure.
It imposes some requirements on you. And so we are not just interpreting the requirement to be a company limited by, registered under the Companies Act to mean just show that you are registered. There are certain things that was the reason why the framers of the
compliance-wise, exactly.
Compliance-wise, they expected you to behave in a particular way.
Exactly.
That is why they said you should be registered under the Companies Act. And so we have taken the step to look at what the basic things that the Companies Act requires our clubs to be. I mean, you should have a board of directors. You should, there's a shareholding structure, a board of directors, annual general meeting. These are the basic things that the Companies Act imposes on the average company. So why can't our clubs also conform to? So what we did last year was to begin to remind the clubs that the FA's requirement for them to be members, to be registered companies, is not just innate, but to show that they are behaving like companies that have been registered under the Companies Act. So we started requiring them to show us, for instance, evidence of your shareholding structure based on an extract from the Registrar General. Because if you ask the clubs to give us their shareholding, people can write anything on paper
and bring it and submit it to you.
And because I've been on the other side before, I know the kind of things clubs sometimes do, and so it puts me in a good position to know some of the tricks. So I said, instead of just writing and listing your directors, the Companies Act requires that anytime you change your directors, there are significant changes, you need to amend your records at the Registrar General. So instead of asking clubs to write and tell us who their directors are, just give us an extract from the Registrar General showing your shareholding structure and your board composition. And Nathaniel, I can bet you that became a problem for several.
I was about to ask because the regular practice is that people have run clubs from their car boots. We don't have proper structures, and that has been one of the very big problems.
So for the current club licensing board, we believe that if we can get the governance systems right, a lot of the requirements out of the club licensing regulations and the FA regulations will be easily met by the clubs if they can begin to put their governance structures right. Even the concept about ability to raise funding, market their products and all those things begins with the governance of the clubs. And so for us, the first step was to see whether they are even following the FA's own guidance, which is registered as a company under the Companies Act, limited liability company, which means what? It means that you have put together a board of directors who are responsible for policy making at the club level. And my belief, if you have the right board will probably appoint the right management. I mean, right board meaning that the people with the right mixture of skill set that a good quality company board has. If the clubs begin to have that, then to all intents and purposes, you expect them to be able to get the right people running the day-to-day activities of the club, which then translates into employing the coaches with the right competencies. Because the regulations
also became a major talking point as well.
So for us as a club licensing board, our thinking around this was that let's get the governance systems right. Let's help the clubs rather than, and so this is the philosophy around it, rather than focusing on punishing the clubs for not doing the right thing. Focus on helping them to do the right thing.
That's it.
And for us, it is working.
Sure.
To the extent that last season, not a single club filed an appeal against any decision of the club licensing board, because they could see a board which was helping them to do the right things, rather than focusing on punishing them for not doing the right. It doesn't mean that we didn't punish any clubs, we did, but that was more of as a deterrent rather than trying to get them, it was not really, it was just to help them realize that there's a limit to what you can and what you cannot do. So that is the approach that we've taken as a club licensing board. So get the governance systems right. So those are documents that we can even begin to ask the clubs to produce now. Somebody will say, well, if they produced it last year, why are you still asking them to produce this year? There are changes that would have occurred in certain clubs. If you use Kotor, for example, we know more recently a new board was appointed and a new chief executive was appointed. So it means that I'm assuming that by now Kotoko would have amended their records at the Registrar General to show the current board. The new Companies Act also imposes a lot of requirements on board of directors. So maybe my advice is that based on the current Companies Act 2019, don't just accept to serve as a board member for any company, because the requirements and the potential punishments
liabilities
are high. And so if Kotoko has made changes to the board, I expect that by now they would have made those amendments at the Registrar General. So when we call for that information at the beginning of the next soccer season, Kotoko should be able to produce. The regulations, the rules around club licenses are that once the season ends, the license automatically expires. So the season ended. So the day that the FA Executive Council took the decision to cancel the previous season, the license that was given by the club licensing board to every club has automatically expired. So to be able to play in the next season league, which we are hoping somewhere October or thereabout, your license to play has to be based on your new application. And so it's a completely different application that you're doing. Whatever documents, whatever requirements we place on you because of the past season are over. Except if the FA punished you for not meeting certain requirements by the FA's regulations, you are still supposed to pay that fine. Beyond that, any requirements imposed on you as far as the club licensing for last season are null and void, because now we are heading into a new season, and so you apply afresh, because a lot of changes happen within clubs, even within a 2 or 3 months period, and so we always want to be sure that we have the latest information on the clubs.
Here on Joy 99.7 FM, we're having a conversation on our football and how generally we have moved forward, with all the changes that COVID-19 has brought regarding everything we do. My guest here in the studio is Dr. Kwame Baah Nuakoh, who heads the Club Licensing Board under the FA, and he's indicated that there is a likelihood we may not be able to exactly start the season, at the earlier announced, month of October because there are more conversations going on, and many other measures need to be put in place to ensure that when we resume, wouldn't have any hitches. Send in your messages. Remember, it's 0244-340-437. 0244-340-437. I've got a few Barcelona messages here. Before we continue, though, you were giggling when you watched the game last night.
I did, yes, with my kids.
These Germans are always teaching us scientific lessons in football. I draw a lot from, there are a lot of similarities from what we saw in Brazil.
I think there's always this phrase, the German machine.
Sure.
Once it's oiled, it's difficult to stop it. 89 minutes into the game, or 88 minutes or so into the game, Bayern were leading, let's say 7-2, and you could still see these young Bayern boys looking for more goals. I know I support a club, Liverpool. Probably if it had been Liverpool after 5 goals, they would have been comfortable.
Yeah.
Probably the Germans are taught differently, even though Liverpool is being coached by a German who exacts a similar
exactly
performance. But probably a German club behaves differently, and they're saying that until the 90 minutes are over, and that's what took Barcelona by surprise. Somebody put a meme out today trolling Barca. That is the Council of Elders. I mean, if you look at the age, the age brackets of the Barcelona players, 32 to 34, majority of the players are in that age category. And so when you meet a young German side which is prepared to run for 90 minutes, obviously it was going to take its toll on.
And talk about trolls. Kelly from Osu is also trolling. He says, "Hi Nathaniel, last night Barcelona received 8 confirmed cases and 2 recoveries." Okay. I've seen that on social media.
Well, I also saw one. I think the trolling is a bit too much. People need to. My domestic dictator is a Barca fan, and she's been struggling with.
So last night you had to,
Well, she was not comfortable watching the game. She has her husband and her kids, all Liverpool fans. And she believed that all of us were against Barca.
I hope you didn't celebrate any of the goals.
For whatever reason, she couldn't watch it with us because she said anytime she heard a shout, she knew Barca was losing. Because she's the only person who is a Barca fan in the family. The rest of us are Liverpool, and she wouldn't even come close to us. So we just kept it that way. And to avoid my kids from probably losing their meal this morning, I told them not to go. So we are behaving ourselves around here. There are too many Barca fans that need a hack this morning.
There's this one from DK. It says, "In fact, Attoh, I have taken back my humble pie because they tore our team apart." Now, as for Barca, the least said about them, the better. Anytime Messi is not informed, the team doesn't perform. Again, they sign off the players so that they can get new and fresh blood into the team. As for Doctor, he's excellent on his job all the time. Bravo. Okay, thank you very much, DK, for the message. Let me do a few more before we resume the conversation here on the Joy Sports Link. This one says, okay, so this one is from Shagimelo in Montana. He says that he's watching us live on My Joy Online TV from Montana, USA. Thank you very much. Keep your messages coming in. 0244340437. Now, Inko Joseph has sent this one. He says the Companies Act also requires all registered companies to pay SNIT contributions for their workers. In this instance, players. Now, what's the Club Licensing Board doing, to the clubs who are refusing to pay SNIT contributions? Now, hello to all of your listeners. Madam Lawrence Kokor and Edward Usubaini at the Snitz Pension House. Thank you very much for doing the listening all the time as well. Okay, so this is a conversation that comes up not only with our football clubs but many companies, across the country.
And Nathaniel, I think like Inko said, we all need to behave like one of the reasons why we ask clubs to register as companies under the Companies Act is to ensure that they know they are operating under certain
rules and regulations.
There are regulations about it.
Sure.
So if I show you the forms that we have designed for the next season, that clubs will have to. So because, for instance, because certain aspects we might not be necessarily focusing on every aspect of the game because of COVID. There are aspects of it that will still pay attention this year beyond the governance bits about the finances of the clubs as well. Because to make the game the professional game that we are looking at, we need to be sure the clubs are running themselves as professional organizations. And so the forms will include even their tax obligations, whether they are meeting their tax obligations, even on behalf of their workers as well as on behalf of their players as well. SNED contributions. So we've designed a form where all the clubs will have to provide information on what they have paid on behalf of every player.
But before you go
salaries, taxes, and SNED
before you go on, are we doing all of these things? I mean, for this bit about the SNED,
yes.
Are we doing all of these before the season starts, or we do it along, the course of the season?
For club licensing, if a requirement is imposed on you as a condition for getting the license, then at any point in time, if you breach those terms, the license can be withdrawn.
Very well.
Once the license is withdrawn, means you have been kicked out of the league.
Very well.
And so that's the kind of conversation we're having with the clubs, that there are certain requirements, including payment of SNED contributions of players and taxes and all those things. If we give you a license and require that you conform to the Companies Act, all that we are saying is that if during the course of the season we have cause to believe that you are breaching the terms of your license, which is you are not conforming to what the Companies Act requires you to do, the Club Licensing Board has every power to withdraw your license. If you remember last season, we gave Liberty professionals the chance to play at the Carl Randolph Park under certain conditions. During the course of the season, we realized that part of the conditions that we required them to fulfill to keep their license were not met. If you remember the game against Hearts of Oak, where we had the
pictures of snakes that had been killed there. Yeah.
If you look at the license letter that was given to Liberty professionals, issues surrounding making sure that that place is cleared by a certain date were stated in the license condition. So, Liberty professionals didn't appeal when the license was withdrawn, because they know clearly that when the licensing board members came for the inspection, they had made certain observations, gave Liberty professionals a certain time frame to correct it, which they didn't do within that time frame. So we withdrew it until what we were expecting was rectified and their license was restored. So in similar way, if clubs are supposed to meet SNED contributions on behalf of their workers and their players, and during the course of the season, the licensing board feels that they have evidence to suggest that they are not doing that, nothing stops the board from withdrawing the license. And that's the harshest punishment. We can either insist that they pay, honor their obligations with a fine, because it even brings the game into disrepute.
Of course.
Because if anybody reports on these things, it brings the whole game into disrepute. So there has to be a fine, and probably ask you to do the needful within a time frame, failing which we might withdraw your license to play in the league. And you can go on appeal, and good luck if you think you can win the appeal, because before we come up with a punishment, we would have done a thorough job, and that's something that I do. I take my time together with my members to ensure that whatever decision we've taken, to a large extent, is not appealable.
I see. You've gone around, and I want you to give me what I mean, and this is sort of away from your job. Your assessment of where our clubs are regarding putting up infrastructure, maintaining the infrastructure, and keeping them, football fan friendly and all of that.
So maybe before I focus on that, there was something I had wanted to say from the beginning, and so that people put this whole football clubs and they are running into perspective. Let me say that your football club is not your average company. So even though we ask them to register under the Companies Act, your football club is not your conventional firm, so that you can analyze and appreciate what they do under the conventional firm theories and those things. And why do I say that? A football club has multi-stakeholders, many, varied, from the owner to the board to the management to the players to the workers to the fans to the sponsors to
the media,
FA, to government, the media. So if you have it's a company, so you take, let's say, Accra's book, it's a limited liability company. But look at the number of stakeholders who all have keen interest in what happens to Hazlevook. But that is not the real problem. The real problem is that they all have probably different objectives for the club. What they expect the club to achieve, their measure of the club's success might be different from, so that of the directors might be different from that of the supporters. What the directors consider probably financial success, or for the supporters purely sports
results.
Success. They want results on the field. Directors are looking for a different thing. The sponsor is looking for eyeballs. The owner is looking for what? Maybe we might not even understand what the owner is really looking for. The reason why he's investing in Hazlevook.
It could just probably be, fulfilling Maslow's need theory on the individual level. It could also be
what is the media's interest in Hazlevook. Sometimes the worst part of it is these varied objectives might even conflict. You might have a situation where the objective for the club of the owner or the directors goes counter to that of the supporters. And I can give you several examples where supporters insist we need to win. Let's say Kotoko has played the league 7 matches to the end of the season. They've already won the league, like what happened in the case of Liverpool. They still have to invest on the match day for the 3 points, in quotes, 3 worthless points from the next match.
Sure.
If before any of the previous matches, there was a certain level of investment they needed to put in to get those 3 points, you think the directors and the managers want to spend that same amount of money to get those 3 points?
No.
Because for them, the 3 points is worthless. But for the supporters,
they want their win.
They want their win.
Yeah.
And so you come to a situation where the supporters' need and their interest goes counter to that of the directors. And then you have a conflict. And I'm saying that your average football club has to grapple with this. And so in economics, we say it's an optimization problem, where they are trying to optimize the highest satisfaction they can generate for all the various interest groups. It doesn't mean that one interest group's interest is more important than the other. And the job of the manager and the directors is to determine what combination of sporting success and financial success and whatever can be considered as success. And that is the real issue for football clubs. And that is why you might have a situation where well-intentioned people from the corporate world with vast experiences from the corporate, successful businessmen and corporate guys can come into a football club and might not succeed, because unlike the corporate world where what defines success might be straightforward, maybe profit margin, return, turnover, or whatever, sales maximization or whatever. In the case of the football club, the optimal level might not be any one of them. And so you need to be able to convince supporters, the board, the sponsors. The only reason why they are coming on board, the number of eyeballs that get to, they are not Father Christmas. So if you don't understand it from this perspective, that a football club has multi-stakeholders with differing objectives and sometimes conflicting objectives, then it becomes difficult to assess what the success of a football club is. And that is where we need, as a football family, to have that conversation. And for individual clubs, at any point in time, that's why engagement becomes important. Being able to, do managers always have to listen to the supporters, or they have to influence the supporters? Maybe we can come back and spend a lot more time, because the real job of a chief executive of a football club, in my humble opinion, is converting the funds into revenue. And it can take several forms, and we can discuss the marketing.
So that brings us to Kotoko, because the most recent example of having someone take center stage, is that of Kumasi Asante Kotoko. You were there. You charged the new CEO to convert, and you've said it already, that Asante Kotoko. Last weekend we were discussing Kotoko here, and one of the problems we identified in the conversation was that there is no scientific evidence of the claims that are being made by, even Nathaniel himself, who talks about some 8 million fans somewhere, you understand.
Definitely, he needs to provide evidence by beginning probably a membership drive, getting a record of that and showing to us that Kotoko there's a difference between 8 million supporters and 8 million members.
Sure.
And I think we don't need to confuse that. 8 million supporters, some of them are fans. They don't even have to come to the stadium, but they are sympathizers of the club. They share in the club's success and they grieve when it loses a match. But they probably do not make any direct contribution to the club. So you can comfort, but we should be focusing on members, i.e., how many supporters in one way or the other contribute either directly or indirectly to the success of the club, either through registered monthly payments that they make, or the fact that they come to the stadium to watch matches. That is more interesting for the economics of the club than just saying that we have 8 million members. Because I remember I made the same comment to Sunderland some years back, before we signed the Kotoko-Sunderland partnership. Said, well, we have this 8 million has been around for God knows how long. it hardly changes, even though the population of Ghana has increased
over the period.
Kotoko always claims we have 8 million supporters.
Sure.
Maybe we need to convert,
making it almost half of the registered voters for this last registration,
which is possible. But the question, but the question is it true that the 18-year-olds and the 19-year-olds on the registered the voter list know even about Kotoko and has a book?
Yeah.
A lot of them probably focus on Chelsea, Manchester, and Liverpool. Nobody is marketing to my children anything about Kotoko and has a book. The only things that they see are Liverpool, Manchester, Chelsea. And so my kids are Liverpool fans. Luckily for them, once a while they get. Don't
we, those who are fortunate to grow in traditions. My late father was a director of Accra Hearts Vogue. He was the club's doctor.
Yes.
And so, don't we think, I was born into it. You have lived in it. So, for you and I, if we find our children following Manchester United, doesn't it then become sort of an indictment on us, even though the primary responsibility of marketing and pushing the brand in their faces is that of the clubs and those who are running it?
Not, you can comfortably say that, but that has always been the position of the clubs. That, once you're a Kotoko fan, you should bring your children along. How has the club convinced me
to bring your children along?
My children to come? Because if I wouldn't want to take my children into an environment of violence.
Okay.
So if all that we hear on radio and television, the media talks about our current game is violence, there's nothing interesting. And these kids have been born in a different generation. It's a social media generation. Their options are completely different from me and you. When I was growing up, I got introduced to Asante Kotoko in a village called Ofuase Kokobin on the Obuasi Kumasi Road. So on a Sunday, I'm standing by the roadside. There was nothing else for me to do. After you come back from church and you found something to do, what else was available for a young boy of, let's say, 8, 9, 10 years? Nothing. There was no mobile phone. You have no access to phones. There's nothing called internet.
The closest was a radio set and commentary, I guess.
The Akasanoma, the preset radio, where you're only listening to GBC. So even during a football commentary, you could have a situation where around 4 something, I think GBC will switch off one transmitter and then switch on a different transmitter. And so they'll tell you that transmission on 3.366 megahertz on the 49-meter band is going off the air. You can now catch. Meanwhile, the match is going on.
Yeah.
But you didn't have a choice. You have to wait till the GBC switches off their transmitter. Now the children of today have a lot of choice. They have DSTV, they have Netflix, they have what else? So they have choices. And so for me, even me as a father, to convince them that let's go to the stadium, it's a lot of work for me to do. Because nobody, let's say Koto or Hazevolk, is making any attempt to target them. The best thing I can do is for me to use a carrot and stick approach, or if you go with me today, I'll buy you this. But they don't have to move from their seat to know what is happening in Liverpool and what is happening in Chelsea or Manchester United. Our TVs are inundated with it. Our radio, the social media space is. And so those of us running the game now need to understand that people don't just support a football club because their father was without football. Sometimes, somewhere along the line, we even rebelled. You make sure that you support the team that your father, is against. Children sometimes rebel just because the father is with Manchester. My father is a die-hard Manchester United fan, but there's not a single one of his children who is a Man U fan. We all turn out Chelsea, Liverpool, and others. So I'm saying that the football clubs have a lot of work to do, because the children of today, the next generation of supporters that they are trying to attract, they have choices. And somebody needs to convince them that instead of spending the time behind the TV watching Netflix or the kiddie Cartoon Network and all those things, you should join your father to the stadium.
A lot of work for the clubs to do, a lot of food for thought here on the Joy Sports Link on Joy 99.7 FM. Okay, so there is this message is asking a question here now. Let me try my best to retrieve it. Okay, now it's from Wilson in Capitol Hill. He says, when Doc was part of the Kotoko management, how did their management objective conflict with the objective of the supporters, which was to excel in Africa? I'm asking this question because of his because of the fact that his management was selling players, through the Black Stars virtually on a quarterly basis. Okay, Wilson sends that message.
So that's exactly my point. So you have been given the choice, the chance to run Kumasi Asante Kotoko. The club, probably at that time, you are in debt, several millions of Ghana cedis. That club still needs to win trophies. And the supporters, and I share with them their sentiments, they need to win trophies. Which trophies? You see, before then, the trophies they will focus on is the Premier League. So first win the Premier League. You win the Premier League, and then their appetite improves.
So go to Africa.
Go to Africa and win Africa.
But it's a different ball game now.
It's a different ball game. The resources required is different. And I came here today with some statistics. To play in the African competition as around that time, by the time you finish if you have to play the prelims, round 1, round 2, round 3 before you qualify to the group stages, the cost is about $780,000 US.
Okay.
Oh, sorry,
okay.
It's $386,000 US.
This is before you get into the group stage. Very well.
And so that is before you start getting any money from CAF. And
so it means that for a lot of the time, our clubs are always running in red when they take part.
Has and Kotoko are where they are because they played several rounds of the CAF Champions League. They leave the competition in debt. There is no guarantee that once you go into Africa, you get into the group stage. And if you are unfortunate not to get into the group stage, then it means you add to the debt of the club. And Hazevolk, the previous administrators of Haz and Kotoko will tell you that that is one of the major sources of the debt. And so the question then is, how do you fund the activities of the club? So we can go into the sources of revenue.
We're charting a new path now, but for a very long time, the format has been the benefactor system where there is one identified source of revenue. Somebody who
in the literature they call it the sugar daddy.
Sure.
The sugar daddy model, where you have one benefactor, he comes in, he has the money, and because of that, he funds everything.
Very well.
And then when his resources run out, the club starts underperforming. And then we'll look for another benefactor. And that's what the unsustainability of club finances come in. And so as a club, you need to determine what are all the potential sources of your revenue. So, Nat, I could just give you a few of them.
Go ahead.
Which is available to a football club. It starts with equity finance. So the owners of the club have to put money in. So if you say you are the owner of the club and the club doesn't have the resource, you need to put money in. That's an owner. So equity, you put money in, and which normally sometimes don't come. You also have a line in most of the clubs, directors' loan. That's exactly what you are talking about. They lend money to the club. In certain cases, they say, "We are forgiving you." So they decide, like Dr. Kwame Baah recently said, all the money that he put into Kotoko, he's giving it out as a grant. But in actual fact, to have run it professionally, it comes in the books of the club as a loan from the director. So that if you make some money from somewhere, you start finding ways of paying off the money. It is not sustainable because, like I said, once the director's sources of income, because he has to be able to generate that money from elsewhere. Meanwhile, as he spends a lot more time on that football club, whatever business he was running to generate that money begins to suffer invariably.
Sure.
Or where he was generating that, because now he's not paying attention, as much attention as he was paying before he became the director of the club. That business starts suffering, and it gets to a stage where he realizes that I cannot continue putting my own resources. So I probably need to start thinking about how I can regenerate. The club itself can generate some money. Share sponsorship is one way. So Kwanse Asante Kotoko has MTN as their title sponsors. They give them a certain amount of money. That's a major source that Kotoko has relied on. They moved from MTN to Tigo back to MTN because of the quantum of monies that they were bringing in. Bank loans and overdrafts in our part of the world,
sure,
because we are in a high interest rate environment, it becomes an unreliable and an unsuitable way of funding football clubs, especially if the league itself is not sponsored. So there's no way the banks will not even give it to you because they don't even know where you are going to get the money to repay. The banks are not for the Christmas. They support bankable businesses and projects, and so if you cannot convince them that there's money coming from other sources, which could include player sales. So let me add player sales. So a club has assets. What are the players? Are they assets or they are also assets of the club? One thing people don't understand about football and football players, which sometimes you are surprised that the supporters don't understand. Every footballer comes from a family, and every Ghanaian footballer wants to travel outside the country. Every Ghanaian footballer.
Fact.
They want to travel outside the country. They go to a particular club as a platform, as a stepping stone. So they come to Kwanse Asante Kotoko not because they want to stay in Kwanse Asante Kotoko forever, and that's why they sign contracts, limited term contracts, 3 years. By the workings of the Bosman ruling, and people need to check what the Bosman ruling, what it brought into the game. Once the contract ends, he goes away for free, and so the club doesn't earn anything from this player. If he signed a 3-year contract and the 3 years is up, he walks away for free. If he goes to a foreign club after the 3-year contract, the club gets nothing. And so when a player, so let's put it in the context that every player wants to travel abroad. So he comes to Kotoko, signs a 3-year contract. Kotoko then becomes a victim of his own success.
Sure.
If this player performs, two things happen. This player, so the supporters take to the player. So they wish the player does what? Stay around for a very long time and continue to give them success.
Sure.
But you are forgetting about the objective of the player. Remember, I talked about the different objectives of the stakeholders. So the player has an objective of playing abroad to make money to take care of his family. So his family members want him to go to Kotoko, perform and go out so that he can take care of them. The club also wants success from him. Now, if you are the manager of the club, the player has played 2 years. He's left with 1 more year on his contract. Because he was successful and the club he has helped the club to be successful, agents from all over the world begin to take notice. If he didn't perform, you don't have a problem. Sure. Meanwhile, you want him to perform.
Sure.
But once he performs, agents around the world want him. So you have a decision to make. 2 decisions. He says, stay behind, I'll increase your salary. But the fact of the matter is that no matter how much I give that player, it will never be comparable to what he will get abroad. So that player is focusing on his objective and saying that, well, if you don't let me go now, I'll wait till the end of the next season. I'm a free agent, and that agent is the beneficiary because he can now sell the player for more than the player would have gotten if he had been sold by Kotoko. Because whoever is buying him now only has to pay only the player. So even part of the money that would have come to Kotoko now goes to the player. So you as the manager of Kotoko, you have a decision to make. Do you keep the player for another season? Yes, win another Premier League, of course, whose prize money is $40,000. Let's talk figures. So let's say the prize money is even $100,000.
Not enough to even cover what, like a quarter in terms of when you're running the club?
Okay, so you're asking the player to stay. The player wants to go. Either you sell him now and make $200,000, $300,000
and sacrifice the title.
Sacrifice. Probably you might not need to sacrifice the league. You sacrifice Africa. that's the situation Kotowo found itself.
Sure.
Because that player will not stay around to help you in Africa. So then you have to make choices as a manager. Remember, the supporters have an objective. They want to go to Africa and perform. The managers are looking at the bottom line and the realities, the players' objectives, the manager's objective, the financial situation that the club finds itself. And then you need to make a choice. Do you allow the player to go, take the $300,000 you might get, which is a huge return on the investment you made, because you probably bought him for $20,000 or $30,000 equivalent. Within 2 years, you are earning $300,000. The real decision you need to make, do I sacrifice $300,000, keep the player in the league, he plays in Africa, there is no guarantee that we will even go to the money zone, so we are going to make losses there. So $386,000 loss because we went to Africa. That player helped us maybe get to the 3rd stage where kicked out. There is also the possibility that he can get you into the money stage. Now let me show you the mathematics at the money. At the time in 2013, I have the figures to support that. To break even in the Champions League, you needed to place 4th in the group stages.
I see.
To break even, that is not to make profit. To break even in the
just covering your cost.
Yes, covering your cost. To break even, that means you would have gone into the money zone. CAF has given you some money to support you. Even that one, you need to finish third or
fourth in the group.
Third.
Okay,
you need to finish 3rd in the group stages. In the Confederations Cup, on the other hand, at that time, to break even, you need to finish 2nd.
In the whole competition?
In the whole competition.
Runner-up.
Runner-up to break even. And there is no guarantee. What is the probability that a Ghanaian club, which has suffered maybe 2 years ago, could not even win the local league? What is the probability that it can? So you make a choice. Maybe we need to start building gradually. Take that $300,000, invest in the infrastructure at the club, which that management was doing, because I have the handing over notes for Dr. Kiki Sapon. And we can look at some of the things that were being done at the time.
Well, yeah, and so, one of the things I was coming to regarding that era, yes, and what was done. I mean, one of the high points was obviously that partnership. Unfortunately, as time went on and as the baton changed, you know, we couldn't go ahead with it, which is very sad. Now, what are the key learnings that you feel the new CEO Nana Amponsa can pick from what you and your boss did at Asante Kotoko?
So I brought a copy of the handing over.
Pretty voluminous.
So it tells you what was left behind.
Yeah.
That the level of transparency. This is the handing over notes that was given. which and the main topics covered, maybe just for your
of course.
benefit of your administration, how the administration was run,
sure.
the number of cases we even had at FIFA at that time, and
sure.
the monies we were expecting, the number of sponsorship, and each of them came with a sponsorship agreement attached as an annex. The players that were sold, for how much came to Kotoko, the finances of the club, the preparation of accounts, the audit, the receivables, the indebtedness of the club to players, to clubs, and other people.
Did you, in terms of indebtedness and profitability, did you leave
yes,
good balance?
So
you left a good balance?
We were beginning to make profit, but of course you still have debt. So I think people struggle to reconcile when somebody say, I made a profit this year, but I left you with a debt. It means that I started with a bigger debt, and I made profit this year. Part of the profit will go to relieve part of the debt.
So in that instance,
with a smaller
so in that instance, what happened?
So what happened was that we were beginning to make profits and reducing the existing debt. So he would have left Kotoko with a smaller debt than he came to meet at Kotoko.
Did he leave with a smaller debt than he came to meet?
Yes,
you have the
figures are there.
Yeah, you have them.
The financial statements of Kotoko at that time. I had the chance to even sit on radio, PJ Moses, and I showed exactly, and it was available.
And it's all in here.
Yeah, we can talk about some of the figures.
Sure.
He left a smaller debt than, and that is not disputed, because even the issues went to court. You remember Dr. Sapon had a court case with Kumasi. But I don't think that the most important thing is, what do you do? What we did at that time was to look at the various facets of the game. And FIFA, for instance, has...
I would have loved it if you could just flip through, and I don't know where it is in the book.
But I probably could share the financial accounts because I can share it with you by email, and then you can share with the benefit of your viewers and your listeners. Because these are audited accounts that can always be there. So, like I said, FIFA even around that time came up with the 11 principles of successful club management. And we were looking at all these various aspects. So, for instance, the legal structure of the club. Luckily for Kumasi Asante Kotoko, now they are looking, like, with the help of club licensing, they are sorting that one up. I.e., make sure that you have the shareholding structure, which we know 100% owned by Otunfo. There's a board of governors, there's a governance board of directors. They are appointing, so they are beginning to work on the governance thing. And I think
from a pure, economics point of view, is it something we need to start looking at? I know the subject of the king of the Ashanti Kingdom becomes very sensitive depending on what you are discussing. But this is business here, and this is profitability here. Now, are we looking at a future where probably, we could have the king of the Ashanti Kingdom, who is the life patron and owner of the club, saying, look, I want to cede off, let's say, like a 40%, share to a strategic partner.
I've had such conversations going on currently around the club. It's not been firmed up. Like I said, these are conversations going on, but I don't really think the issue is about really shareholding, unless we are looking at the first point about the source of finance, equity finance. So we are using the dilution of the share shares as a ways of raising further funding for the club. If that's the main reason, then I support it. But the mere fact that one body owns 100% of the club doesn't consign that club to failure. It is about what happens thereafter. If he's prepared to put the right amount of monies in, because Abramovich, Chelsea, has had a lot of success during the Abramovich, more than previously. During the Abramovich, he owns 100% of Chelsea, isn't it? But they're making it. They've won several trophies. So the issue really is not the shareholding structure, and if he's
but at least in terms of investment.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. We are discussing that purely on the fact that the club doesn't have the amount of money that is required to make it as great as the members want it, and that maybe Mensah might not be in a position to pump in that amount of money. Then diluting the shares, giving the old man a majority shareholding and allowing people to come in with some money, that would be a good step. Then that also in some way also affects the way the club is governed, and that is also in a good direction. But for me, it's all about what happens beyond owning the club. It is the governance structures that you put in that will determine whether it's successful. In football, in the literature, and I'm a student of the literature as far as football management is concerned, there is no one working structure that every club who wants to be successful is asked to adopt. Every different clubs, from the Real Madrid to Manchester to Liverpool, each of them has a very different structure as far as ownership is concerned. Even the governance structure, sometimes it differs from one club, but all of them have achieved success. It is what you do beyond the shareholding structure that is important. And like I said, if you want to really look at the principles, the areas you need to focus on, the finances, what needs to go into that, the facilities. Because you see, one of the things that, let's say, if you use the Dr. Sapon administration, you are beginning to build the facilities that ensures long-term success for the club. A club needs proper training facilities. If you want them to perform on the field, you need proper training facilities. Let me give you an example. So Kumasi Asante Kotoko plays in the African Cup competition. Sometimes you go to Algeria and they are going to play on an astroturf, an artificial turf. Before Kotoko has to goes to Algeria, they then had to go to Feyenoord, Gomuafete, which was the only club in Ghana that had an artificial pitch at that time, or train at Tema Sports Stadium. A club of Kotoko's caliber, which will consistently have to play such matches at the highest level, will need its own pitch. And so, for instance, at that time, in this document, there is evidence to show that Kotoko has signed an agreement with Blue Jeans Energy Drink. Part of the sponsorship, the second and third year sponsorship package was supposed to be used to build an artificial turf. They were not going to give the money to Kotoko. They were going to use to fund the construction of the pitch directly. I see. And it's covered in this handing over news, and it's a matter of public knowledge. The training ground facilities, the changing rooms, the club secretariat, which is required by club licensing. The current Kotoko secretariat is not the secretariat for a club that wants to be called the big club that we all want it to be. You needed to make sure that you have the space to do the kind of management things that is required. So that was one of the things that the management was doing. The Kotoko has to accommodate majority of its players, because you see, unlike Europe, where in the player's contract, a player is given a consolidated sum and then he goes and look for his own accommodation. Here, if you are not careful and you give the money to players and say, go and look for your own accommodation, they will go and sleep in a corner that will work against Kotoko. Because if he's going to, instead of using the money for proper accommodation, he decides to sleep in a mosquito-infested, area of the city. You are not going to get the performance that you are looking for. So most of the Ghanaian clubs have taken the position that we need to find ways of accommodating the players. This should change when players become a bit more professional in the way they behave, because if the club gives you money, allowance for accommodation, for electricity, water, and those things, you should be able to behave like a professional. Know also that when you go home, there are certain activities you cannot engage in, otherwise it affects the club. You see our players playing gutter to the backyard football. Sure. 2 days before
a Premier League
game, which professional player in Europe will do that? And so the clubs have had to take positions that doesn't even sound, smart, but that is the reality that they have to deal with. And so because of that, Kotoko will want to accommodate a lot of his players. So we're building a youth hostel, and with a plans to build a senior team hostel, which clubs like El Ali have. If you go to even Sudan, El Hilal, they have hostels for there. So each senior player is given one flat so that he lives there with his family. If we can get to that stage, then we know Kotoko so the rental issues no longer becomes an issue. you get to a stage where you have all the facilities and the equipment. Now you can focus on winning titles. We have decided that even though we don't have the facilities and the equipment and the right systems in place, we want to win titles. And that's why the title winning is not sustainable. So Hearts can win, once in a while a Ghanaian club can win a trophy on the continental level, but we cannot sustain it. Because it requires systematic planning and investment to be able to be successful continually on the African continent. It's just like even in Europe. You look at the current approach by Barcelona. Previously, they were focusing on the players coming from their academy, isn't it? When they changed the model to start, now we've been able to make a lot of money. So we think we have arrived and that we can buy success. You can buy success in the interim, but a time will come where buying big players does not necessarily guarantee you victory. They have all the players with the biggest names, isn't it? But look at what happened to them yesterday. There has to be a structure to the way you do things. And at that time, we were systematically planning on how invest in the infrastructure for Kumasi Asante Koro. You build the training ground facilities, office complexes, even at the Adakujachi. I'm talking about the Adakujachi project. Since Dr. Sapon left, not even a single block has been added to the Adakujachi project, because probably it was not in somebody's plan. But building that one also included sacrificing certain things, because part of the money being used to do Adakujachi will come from the player sales that you have to make, which also has another reason why you have to make, because the player wants to go. Because if you don't allow him to go, he will not perform and he will go for free. But if you take that and invest long term, so Kotoko needs to have a longer term vision than the short term vision of, I want to win the league next year, I want to win Africa next year. I don't think Kotoko, as is now, has the capacity to win Africa. I remember around that time, people were comparing Kotoko to TP Mazembe, because Kotoko and Engelbert were of the same level some years back. In the 70s, Kotoko was bigger than Engelbert, which became TP Mazembe. But the difference between Kotoko and Engelbert was that there was some systematic investment. If you go there today, go and see the infrastructure that TP Mazembe uses, the training facilities that they have. They probably have their own state. And they have an owner who has probably limited resources. Moise Katumbe was the governor of the region of Katanga. At the time that people were comparing Kotoko to TP Mazembe was flying for matches in private jets. Owned by the owner.
Yes.
And so people need to have perspective. The fact that Kotoko was at the same level with somebody some years back, you ask yourself what kind of investment transitions that have taken place in Kotoko over the years. One of the real challenges Kotoko then had was the fact that everybody who came to run Kotoko left Kotoko probably not in a good mood. So he went away, he was brought in, he invested his money, got to a stage, was asked to go away. He goes away without leaving the institutional memory. So the new person who comes in cannot even speak to the last person who ran Kotoko.
That is one of the problems.
If you cannot,
you have Dr. Sapon's administration left this for.
We wanted to break that. That's why I was then writing my PhD in Sterling. I was brought back home to help compile this document, so that we left something for the press, including emails and phone numbers. I'll just give you one example.
Sure.
Kotoko at that time had gone to South Africa with Dr. Sapon to discuss a potential sponsorship by Adidas. And we have been introduced to Adidas by our partners from Sunderland, because they were being kitted by Adidas.
Sure.
And so we went to Sunderland, had a meeting, and said, well, we can refer you to Adidas. Adidas says, well, our South African office is responsible for
the Africa region.
Africa. So
okay, West
you
Africa.
need to have a conversation with them. Myself and Dr. Sapon flew to Cape Town to have a discussion with Adidas. Sent our request. They said they had agreed to sponsor Kotoko. And within that same period, Dr. Sapon resigned. In this handing over note, the email address of the contact person at Adidas is stated here. The same way we're having conversations with Symbion Energy through an agency in London.
Let's hold on here. Now, the name of the document is handing over notes.
Yes.
Can you tell me if there was any contact between Doc and his predecessor to discuss this? Because in our political structure, for instance, there's an election, there's a new administration, there's a period where meetings are held, so tell me about that one and explain to me.
There's a cover letter here.
Sure.
I will not tell you where precisely the address is, but in that letter it talks about, to ensure a smooth transition, I've also taken liberty by sending a copy of the handing over notes to Mr. Paul Edujemfi, who has been nominated by the board of directors of the club to act as the executive chairman. So there was smooth transition. This document was given to the person who was nominated by the board as the person to take over from Dr. Sapon. So these are not issues. The fact that this document got to Kotoko to allow them to use this is not in dispute. But I'm just saying that there are so many things that I just use it to buttress the fact that Kotoko needs to build on previous knowledge. So, for instance, if Kotoko is to go to African this year, Nana Yao has just taken over as Kotoko chief executive. He has no idea about how to go to Africa, to take Kotoko to Africa, isn't it? But if he has a chance of speaking to Kotoko, previous Kotoko administrators, as to what you need to put in place, what do you need to guard against, Nana Yao will be successful because he benefits from the volume of experience of these people. If, on the other hand, these people feel peeved and because of that they are not prepared to support Nana Yao, Nana Yao will start as just like any new administrator. And so what then makes Kotoko big? Kotoko has lost its institutional memory.
And this applies to all clubs, doesn't it? This you are discussing applies to all Kotoko as an example because you function there.
I've functioned there, and Kotoko is huge. And I remember when I was when I attended the inauguration of Nana Yao in Kumasi, I said that Kotoko is arguably the biggest club in Ghana, and some Kotoko supporters took me on because I should have said Kotoko is the biggest club. And I said because at that forum I was not planning to support my statement with facts.
Exactly.
I didn't want to get into that.
Of course, considering your background, you couldn't have left out the word arguably. That I agree with you on that one.
But because there are different metrics, some people use revenue size and whatever as a measure of big. So I didn't want to get into that debate. But Kotoko is huge. It's undenied, and probably I have the figures from some work I done earlier. If you compare Kotoko to the other 16 clubs that played around, 15 clubs that played around that time, let me just give you one statistic. The total revenue from all Kotoko home matches put together is more than what the other 15 clubs' revenue put together, including
Kotoko home matches. Okay.
If you put the revenue from those matches.
Okay, and this was a particular season?
Yes,
or a couple of seasons?
A couple of seasons.
Okay.
I've done some
research.
That time I did analysis from 2006 to 2012, and I have figures to support that. The average attendance for Kotoko way high, and each club ways to play Kotoko, because for most of the clubs, if you play Kotoko, with the average without Kotoko is about 1/5 of the average with Kotoko.
I see.
So most clubs wanted to play Kotoko. I'm using this because these are figures that I can back it with the facts that I have in the research. All the revenue from the other 15 clubs put together, from matches involving their home matches, was not up to the revenue from Kotoko's home matches. So if you are just focusing on revenue coming in from gates as a metric to determine which one was a bigger club, obviously Kumasi has an.
Okay, let's do some messages. Charles Benonioka says, I share what Kwame is saying, very apt. For the new Kotoko boss, I pray he lives up to the task because I see the club being too big for him. Also, I hope his background as an agent will not make him breed players for a season and then we don't find them again. That will be dangerous for the club and for the league. Okay, now Fifi Banson has sent this one. He says, you guys have suffered together. I should ask you about your trip to Kwabibrim FC. Well, which season was this when they were playing?
Fifi, I beg you, because what Fifi Banson is asking me to say. This was during the Herbert Mensah days.
Sure.
Myself and Fifi were the few pro Kotoko people on radio.
I see.
And we were quite close to Herbert at that time. So he encouraged us to watch every Kotoko match. And I remember on that trip, you might not believe in superstition, but when you have a love for a particular thing, you do all sorts of things.
I see.
Just to make sure your club wins. These were guys on radio. We are just
I want you to get into the details after this message.
Okay.
Hold it 1 second. Good show, Nat. Interesting comments by Kwame. So he has all these brilliant ideas. How come he can't go pick up the Kotoko CEO job? I think Kotoko is being run down. Remember, some players of Kotoko have gone recently. Abege, that guy couldn't even break a ball. So what goes into such recruitments? What are the recommendations of the coach? Kwame spoke about Dr. Che forgiving Kotoko all the debts that they owed him. Has he spoken about the profits that he made from the team? Okay, this is from Godwin in North Kanishi. Now, Felix in Ohio has sent this one. Glad he reminded you that he was once in your seat, and he was also so good, behind the console. Salute my senior from University Primary. Always great hearing him speak. Okay, this is from Felix Adai. He's listening from Ohio, USA. Felix, thank you very much for the message. Okay, so you were talking about your evidence of superstition, that you got good evidence that there is some sort of superstition.
Well, you see, I don't get involved in those things throughout my time in Kotoko.
And anyway, while Dr. Kwame Baah Nuakoh is sharing this story with us, you can start the calls, start hitting your keypad. It's 0302216541. 0302216541.
Maybe Nat, I'll advise that on this topic of superstition, you bring Dr. Patrick Ofori, my colleague, into the studio. He has a whole PhD thesis on superstition in sports.
I see.
So his PhD thesis had to do with that. So he can share better. But I'm talking about my real life experiences in the game in terms of the superstition. What we used to tell the players in Kotoko during Dr. Sapon's time, was that nobody stops you from being spiritual and believing in certain things, but don't impose yours on everybody else, and don't break the rules. So you can do whatever you want to do, because I think that if I try to stop you, it will even affect you mentally.
Sure.
So do whatever you want to do, but make sure it doesn't break any of the FA regulations.
Sure.
During the Fifi Banson thing, we went there and we were supposed to throw some coins into some river.
Okay, you were supposed to throw coins into a river. Who based on whose advice and whose direction?
Well, there is almost always the supporters.
I see.
They've gone to see the old lady, and he says Kotoko will win today, and you have to throw some coins.
So which river located where?
On the way to Kwabibrim.
I see. And how many coins were you supposed to throw in?
Well, a couple of them. That once the Kotoko team and the Kotoko contingent threw these coins into the river, Kotoko was going to win.
I see.
The other bit was that there was a particular football that was being used on the pitch, that if Kotoko allows that ball to be used on the pitch, they will lose the game. So my friend Fifi, was it you who deflated the balls, or it was me? And we were supposed to.
Well, Fifi is supposed to. Yeah.
We're sitting on the on the touch line, watching the game, and the fans behind us are telling us, the Kotoko fans, that whenever that ball comes there, they will point it out. We need to deflate it. Otherwise, if it goes back onto the field, the Kwabibrim boys will use the ball to.
So what happened during the game?
Won.
Kotoko won or
Kwabibrim won. They beat Kotoko 2-1.
Are you the top there? Let's get to our first caller. Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on the show.
Hello, good afternoon. Jacob Ishen is my name.
Jacob, thank you for joining us on the Joy Sports Link.
You're welcome. Actually, I'm very happy listening to the conversation from Dr. Kwame Baah Nuakoh. Well, always have been saying that our major problem in our football in Ghana is maladministration. If you fold our football developmental stages, the biggest problem is maladministration. We have all that it takes to be the best in the world, but problem is administration. We have one, inadequate, knowledgeable people gallivanting around our football administrators. Two, we have people who take the loopholes in the system to take advantage of the clubs. Three, the clubs are made to look inferior to the people at the helm of affairs. They only threaten them with fines, and when the money comes, not proper accountability is given out per the transparency, per the regulations dictate, and people are afraid to voice out. These are the major problems affecting football development in this country. I'm happy Kwame Baah Nuakoh is diplomatically exposing and using his new office to enforce some aspects of the club administration that will see to the well-grounding of the club. My brother, good luck done. I always support you, and keep on taking hard for the club to stick to the the regulations, the club licensing regulations. I saw it as a game changer. That is going to change the face of football in the country. Once it is implemented to the letter, and I trust you, please do it. I support you. Thanks.
Thank you, Jacob. 0302216541. Hello, good afternoon. Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. My name is Nathaniel.
My name is Tusalinko.
Please go ahead. Thank
you. To begin with, I think Dr. Kwame's led club licensing board is doing a great job and must be encouraged. Last 2 months, I had the opportunity of being in a meeting with one of the club licensing board's members, Manuel Newton Dashibre. And after listening to his presentation, I realized they have a lot in stock. And with time, I'm sure they'll be able to change the face of Ghana football. Back to the African club of the century, Kumasi Asante Kotoko. You see, from the beginning, he mentioned something that converting, let's take it, one of the duties of the CEO is to make sure at least you convert the supporters, the goodwill you have, into funds. I remember between 2000 and 2003, I was the PRO for Hot Circuit 2, one of the supporters from Kumasi Asante Kotoko. We had a program and we invited Dr. Baah Nuakoh, in fact, then Kwame Baah Nuakoh, and he came for the program. And if you were there to see the number of supporters who trooped in there, just to see the man who was hosting Kwame's diary on Adom FM, just to see a Kotoko management member coming to support a new circle. And I can tell you, after that meeting, about half of the supporters who came up to for that program have, in fact, they have remained in the circle, and they are still Kotoko supporters or Circle 2 members. But now, a whole regional council of the supporters will be having a program. You invite a management member and they will not come there. They are taking us for granted. If they don't know the use or whatever motivation supporters give to the teams, they should look at what is happening to Barca now. Look at Juventus. Because of COVID, the supporters are not in the stadium to support them. Look at how they are suffering. I hope this new administration will learn something from it and make good use of the numbers we are talking about in Koto.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's go for another caller. Hello, good afternoon.
My name is Peter, calling from Sydney.
So please go ahead, my brother.
Yes, I'm very happy for today's discussion. I think the club licensing board has a lot to do. Doctor has spoken a lot, but when you look at some of the pitches our teams play on, it's very bad. You know, it's very bad, and we shouldn't encourage some of these things. I heard them citing an example of Liberty Professionals. But apart from Liberty Professionals, most of the pitches are very bad, and I don't know if the GFA can do something about it. As Samwajan Elim was able to have a modern sport for school, Accra Academy. So what are these things doing? So, and if these things are not able to do this, the GFA should insist they shouldn't play. If you have about 5 teams or 5 clubs who have wall pitches they can play on, they should be allowed. But when you go some of the pitches, even ball control is a problem.
I hear you.
And we want to compete with these teams in the Northern Africa. We are all joking. And the club licensing board should be serious on this. The pitches are just not good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, Doc, as we're wrapping up the conversation, I want you to just quickly give me 7 key, requirements that make you approve a venue for use, especially because the caller was talking about the quality of pitches.
The last caller made a point about even the quality of the pitch.
Sure.
There are standards.
Okay.
What we had last season was that the time frame between when we, remember we came through normalization. The time frame between when things were normalized and when football had to begin was quite short, so we couldn't implement the whole spectrum. So we took a bit more relaxed approach to licensing of the pitches. Like we're saying, for this coming season, for instance, if we don't even go full throttle, only a few pitches will be used for the season. That will mean that only the best pitches available will be used for the Premier League. It's good for television, it's good for the sponsors and the viewership as well. But one of the key requirements is safety.
Okay. Safety
and security of the spectators and the players. It's not just the spectators, but the players as well. So you look at the perimeter fencing as a requirement, especially for Premier League and Division 1 League matches.
Sure.
Maybe let me just give you one small example. In the Medina Stadium, you remember there was this controversy about the newly constructed stadium at Medina, where the Legon cities had wanted to use the venue, but the club licensing board rejected it purely on safety issues. If you go to that place, at the time we inspected, you have a concrete wall less than 5 meters from the touchline, which means that if 2 players are running at top speed and they slide on the pitch, one can hit his head against the concrete wall. That was one of the basic reasons why that stadium was rejected. So the safety and security of the spectators is paramount. Then we come to the quality of the pitch as the next thing, because yes, the quality of the pitch can be improved, and we are helping them, asking them to install the right irrigation systems and so. But if the stadium is not safe and secure, football cannot even start. It's the starting point. It's safety and security.
Final words on the administration you're working with. You're working with the Kurt Okrakoh administration. How's it gone so far as we wrap up?
I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve and the fact that the president of the FA shares the tenets of the club licensing system, meaning that it's supposed to be an independent body. So far, I think he's allowed us that independence to operate, because that's the only way we can ensure that standards are improved. If you have a situation where people think that they can go above your head to maybe the president of the FA and he will call you to order to stop you from implementing your regulations, they will not achieve anything. So I think on that score, I can only speak around the club license. He's also given me the opportunity to serve on the advisory board to advise the FA Executive Council on the autonomous league, which is headed by Togbe Afede. I think we are doing quite tremendous amount of work to be able to advise the Executive Council very soon on the direction it wants to go as to make the Premier League autonomous from the FA. So we're working on that. We are being led by Togbe, and we are putting Togbe Afede, and we are putting a lot of energy into that as well. So I can only thank him for giving me the opportunity to serve and allow me to apply the things I gathered from my fun days, my media days, my football administration days to help the game. And maybe another time we can really delve into the principles of successful club management and what needs to be done to make each of them, they can copy from this.
Sure. Doc, thank you so much. We are so grateful. The time is never enough to discuss and exhaust all of these issues. Dr. Kwame Baah Nuakoh, who heads the club licensing board under the FA, has been my guest here today on the Joy Sports Link on Joy 99.7 FM. And of course, today happens to be a good day. Traditionally, I'm a Ga, and so the people of English, are celebrating Homawo. The essence of the Homawo festival is to say goodbye to hunger and to push away hunger. It's supposed to be something that brings good omen. So, we were saying happy Homawo to.
No,
this is we're not in normal times. So having that whole big jam is not. I hear you. Evans Mensah has promised me a present after work, so I'm going to his car. But listeners, you'd have to forgive me. At a certain point, I lost my trend of thought. We're one family, so I'd have to say this. I received some very, very bad news, and we monitor, our equipment while I received some very, very bad news, and this is the second time in my 11 years here that I received very bad news, while on air. The first time I was able to hold myself, but this one hit me pretty hard. So please forgive me for that. It gets tough sometimes, man. It gets really tough. Thanks to the whole production team. Evans Mensah is on standby to bring you the Joy Headline News at 2. May the good Lord bless us all. I'll be back next week, by the grace of God, with another Joy Sports Link. Thanks to my lead producer, Benedict Orusu, and the rest of the Joy Sports team. My name is Nathaniel Attoh, and I have love for sport.